You can't tell I did my best, but I am cosplaying an Albinauric today, specifically Latenna. So if you want to know more about Albinaurics, Latenna, and some theories I've been crafting up, then stay tuned. After traversing the gem-laden crawl space of the lakeside crystal cave, you will emerge onto a ledge, offering a cozy lookout to the lakes of Liurnia. Welcome to the slumbering wolf shack. However, the owner of this titular wolf is close by and immediately on the defensive. This figure challenges your intentions here.
Foul tarnished. What do you want? I told the all-hearing brute that I possess no such medallion.
This is Latenna, and her initial reluctance to speak to you centers around a medallion. She presumes this is the reason you are seeking her out. If you've spoken to Gideon Offney beforehand, you will know that he has a keen interest in Latenna.
Find the Albinauric woman. She hides in a cave to the west of the Laskia ruins, which jut from the mist-shrouded lake of Liurnia. She knows the location of the medallion's counterpart, I'm sure.
So, this coveted medallion that everyone keeps referring to is none other than the Haligtree secret medallion, and it has been split into two halves. Combining the two halves creates a key to accessing the consecrated snowfield and ultimately reaching Miquella's Haligtree. For Gideon, his pursuit is not simply about obtaining the medallion, but what it unlocks: knowledge. Gideon wants to expand his understanding of unknown areas and the current status of demigods, including figures like Melania and Miquella. But Latenna adamantly denies possession of the medallion, which contradicts what Gideon told us. So who actually has the medallion? This will be a long, extensive journey, so I want to first thank HelloFresh for sponsoring this video, who without their support, investing more time into long-form content wouldn't be as easy. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. Many people are making resolutions to improve their eating, but are unsure where to start. HelloFresh can help you get on track with health-forward options like calorie-smart and protein-smart recipes. Simply choose your meals and delivery date, and HelloFresh will handle all the meal planning and shopping for you. If you hate meal planning and grocery shopping as much as I do, I highly recommend HelloFresh. It's super easy and quick to choose my meals thanks to their menu, which concisely shows the cooking times. It's also helped me try new foods and food combinations and learn new cooking skills that aren't as daunting as I thought they would be. What about nights when you are too busy or you've had a really long day and cooking for an hour is the last thing you want to do? HelloFresh has their quick and easy line of meals that only take 15 minutes, designed to minimize stress and focus more on enjoying a nutritious meal. Whether you want to save money, eat better, or stress less about cooking, HelloFresh can help you do all three. Plus, if you join right now, you will get one breakfast item per box completely for free, as long as you have an active subscription. Click the link in the description or use my code and get free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active. So if you want to help out the channel and get some free breakfast while you're at it, consider using my link or code below. Thank you again, HelloFresh, and now let's begin the lore. To get to the bottom of this, let's take a few steps back and start at the village of the Albinaurics. A gruesome scene unfolds here. The village, once home to the Albinauric people, is now a bloodbath, raided, ravaged, and its inhabitants subjected to unspeakable horrors. Gideon's quest for the medallion turned the settlement upside down, leaving destruction and chaos in its wake. However, the medallion's owner, Albus, evaded Gideon's rampage by assuming the guise of a seemingly inconspicuous ceramic pot.
Please, no. Dear me. I haven't a clue. No secrets lie with me, not a one.
Once you assure him that you are not a threat, Albus entrusts you with half of the medallion and discloses the next step in the quest.
And if you should meet the young Albinauric Latenna, then please give it to her.
When you return to the wolf shack and present the medallion to Latenna, her initial distrust fades upon recognizing this item.
Oh. Do you speak true? So old Albus entrusted his medallion to you. Then I've no choice. but to trust that this was his dying will.
Albus would have taken this medallion piece to his grave, and Latenna, seeing that it is now in your possession, concludes that he had no choice but to hand it over. Why do these people treasure this amulet so much? As I said before, it unlocks the route to Miquella's Haligtree, so what is the significance of that location?
A chosen land awaits us, Albinaurics. The medallion is the key that leads to the city.
It is more than just a city. It's a sanctuary where Albinaurics can find peace. That's why the medallion is referred to as secret. That's why it is split into two pieces, and that's why, even when you combine the pieces, you have to traverse a treacherous blizzard landscape, complete a long-winded puzzle, all whilst getting stabbed in the back by invisible enemies, to then even get the option of transporting yourself to the Haligtree. These are all intricate safeguards to maintain both the security and tranquility of an Albinauric safe haven.
It's only a quaint treasure for we who cannot make the journey, but for dear Latenna, it is needed to fulfill her purpose.
Albus recognised that he would never be able to embark on the journey to the Haligtree, but nevertheless found solace in holding onto the medallion as a keepsake. But Latenna has taken on a more critical role, so she physically needs the medallion to progress.
Would you consider doing me a great service? I must go back. There is something I must do, even if I must say farewell to my wolf Lobo. Will you show me the way? To the land of Miquella's Haligtree.
Latenna's commitment to completing this mission is so strong that she is prepared to leave her dear Lobo and set off. Her request begins the next stage of the story, finding the other half of the medallion. Latenna does indeed know its location, despite not having it herself. But Latenna is likely as loyal as Albus is to the Albinaurics' secret land. She would have taken that secret to her death. So the other medallion half is in Castle Sol. Latenna will tell you this information even if you decline her request to take her with you.
But please, allow me to say my piece. Even if you cannot take me, old Albus wished I relay to you the following. The other half of the medallion can be found beyond the Forbidden Lands, north of the Erdtree, in Castle Sol, on the mountain tops of the Giants, accessible by the grand lift of Rold.
At first I thought it was strange that she openly divulged the medallion's location, but it's because she trusts you. You having Albus's half of the medallion is proof of this. So if neither Albus nor Latenna can complete this mission, then there is some chance you can, hence why she tells you the medallion's location. But this quest is far more interesting if you accept Latenna's plea to take her with you, so we'll do that. But before you go,
farewell, Lobo. My faithful wolf. My better half.
As the name Slumbering Wolf Shack suggests, Lobo is in eternal sleep. His passing explains why Latenna was so defensive and cautious when she first saw you. Another tarnished had not been so respectful.
Or have you come to take more from me? Was my other half not enough?
Latenna's use of the term other half has a dual meaning here. The quest for the medallion involves locating two physical halves, and from an idiomatic perspective, Lobo is Latenna's other half emotionally. Other half is an affectionate way of referring to a loved one. Was my other half not enough refers to Lobo being cruelly taken from her.
My apologies for my coarse words earlier. I presume the worst. Seeing that you're another tarnished like that all-hearing brute.
The all-hearing presumably is a nickname for Gideon. There is another finger reader that also refers to him as such. This would also be supported by his physical appearance, armor covered in ears, and his objective to gain knowledge by listening to everyone's business. Gideon or his henchmen likely sought to extract information on the medallion's whereabouts from Latenna. When she resisted, that resulted in the tragic demise of her beloved wolf, either as a cruel punishment or a way of making her talk. But even then, in the face of such brutality, she would not acquiesce and kept her mouth shut.
I will go with the tarnished. so that our journey will not have been in vain. Forgive me, Lobo.
Lobo was not just her companion, but also her only means of transportation. The journey to Miquella's Haligtree is not just miles and miles to travel, but it's near impossible for Latenna to make that journey alone because she is an Albinauric. And one thing about her subspecies is that they cannot walk.
I'm Latenna, an Albinauric, the same as old Albus.
Despite their appearance differences, they actually have one thing in common physically. They are both sedentary. Albinaurics like these two cannot use their legs. This is confirmed in Albus's last words.
My legs will soon fade, and with them my life. Alas, this is the immovable fate of all Albinaurics.
This trait is also shown by the fading legs observed in their character models, creating a slightly see-through effect. The cause of their immobility could be explained by a particular item drop, the Albinauric blood clot. Thick, coagulated blood of the Albinaurics. This description sounds similar to the real-life condition of deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. DVT is when a blood clot forms in the veins, usually in the lower half. Different factors can cause DVT, but one of the most commonly known ones is a lack of movement. Albinaurics may have developed DVT because of their sedentary lifestyle. Sadly, you can die from DVT. If the clot dislodges and travels through your bloodstream into your lungs, that can be fatal. May explain why Albus coughs and splutters right before he dies, as if he is experiencing the symptoms of a pulmonary embolism. I'm reaching with this, I admit, like that would be the first time. Those noises could easily be explained as a popular voice acting choice to make that sound signify death. Although morbid, looking more into real-life connections and where inspiration may have been drawn from is fun. What is certain is that Albinaurics cannot use their legs and probably have never been able to use them, based on how thin they are, instead relying on their long arms to pull themselves forward. So returning to Latenna, this is why she relied so heavily on her companion Lobo. He was her legs. And after a poignant farewell, you and Latenna set off to find the other half of the medallion. But wait, I just established that Latenna cannot walk. How are we going to travel together? That is when something very unique happens. Latenna disappears into ashes. But she is not dead, she has become a spirit summon. Ashen remains in which spirits yet dwell. A rare case of one who chose to become a spirit voluntarily. This is the only one of 64 total spirit ashes we see willingly go from living to an in-between state. Other spirits perished long ago, were unwillingly transformed into puppets, or fell in battle against you. Latenna is an outlier. The concept of spirit ashes retaining their essence, their soul in the world, not yet reclaimed by the Erd Tree, is explained by Rani.
'Tis a bell for calling forth spirits. Summon them with it. From ash and return to the Erd Tree.
So you can call on Latenna anytime like you would for a typical spirit ash. Gameplay-wise, Latenna's immobility due to her legs is translated into her spirit summon mechanics. Acting as a stationary turret, she excels in ranged combat with her bow and arrow. Latenna was renowned as a deft magic archer, but having lost her beloved wolf companion Lobo, she cannot move from the place where she was summoned. A notable exception to this occurs if you enter an area that both has direwolves in and a summon icon. If you position her just right, Latenna can ride on the back of an enemy wolf, turning her into a mobile archer, utilising the wolf's bite and frost breath attack. This is one of my favourite hidden secrets in Elden Ring, although a little janky at times. And Latenna's aid extends beyond combat. A voice will be heard at specific locations, providing guidance and insight.
Do you hear me? It is I, Latenna. We're almost there. Castle Sol lies just off to the north, where the other medallion is housed. It will grant passage to the land of the Haligtree.
This is another unique feature of Latenna's. She can communicate and perceive the world outside, all whilst in the form of spirit ashes. This line will occur when you reach the mountaintop of the giants. She will prompt you to go to Castle Sol. Now, what is the relevance of the medallion being at this location? Let's take a look around. Castle Sol is an abandoned stronghold, home now to only animals, ghosts, and a lone Commander Nile. The latter is the fearsome boss you must defeat before gaining access to the medallion's missing piece. I made a Q&A video before exploring the relevance of this character, and I'll be honest, the lore of this area is a little convoluted, but I'll do my best to break it down. In Castle Sol, you encounter banners and weapons adorned with a solar eclipse symbol. The sun in eclipse is said to be the symbol of the wandering mausoleum where the soulless demigods slumber. The wandering mausoleums are these curious constructs, with one patrolling outside Castle Sol. And for an example of a soulless demigod, that sounds like Godwyn. Rani initiated an assassination plot where she was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone. Commander Nile, a fearsome boss guarding Castle Sol, is a lone survivor who commanded spirits to defend his long-past master. That master, presumably Godwyn, perished on the night of the dire plot, leaving Nile as its only guardian. The objective of the stronghold now became to bring Godwyn back to life, as mentioned by a pleading spirit. "O great sun, frigid sun of Sol, surrender yourself to the eclipse. Grant life to the soulless bones." What is being described here is a total eclipse. If you've ever been lucky enough to witness one, at the moment of totality, when the moon completely covers the sun, it looks like the sun is black, lost of all warmth and devoid of fire. The spirit is probably referring to this when they say frigid sun. Consequently, a belief was created that the presence of a total eclipse would somehow restore life to Godwyn. However, according to another spirit, this was a colossal failure. "Lord Mikola, forgive me. The sun has not been swallowed. Our prayers were lacking. Your comrade remains soulless." The attempt to revive Godwyn appears to have been Mikola's idea, and the golden epitaph, a decorative weapon, suggests a close relationship between the two half-brothers. A sword made to commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden, first of the demigods to die, infused with the humble prayer of a young boy. "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." The young boy mentioned here is most likely Mikola, who is characterised by his curse of eternal youth. His prayer seems to be wishing for his brother to find peace, as Godwyn is currently a soulless husk. Mikola's sentiments seem to be willing for him to be released from his rotting, mutating, deathroot-spreading fish corpse. However, there appears to have been a change of heart in Mikola, as according to the spirits, there was an attempted ritual to bring Godwyn back. In the context of the medallion, because it is Castle Sol, Godwyn might have been entrusted with a key to his brother's exclusive invitation-only city. So when Godwyn perished, Commander Nile stepped up to guard this precious key. You cannot get the medallion half without defeating Nile first. What doesn't make sense is why Mikola would only give half of the medallion to his brother, unless there is another character who was also close with Mikola and shared the other half of the medallion, but in that case, the two characters who possessed it would need to combine them every time they wanted to visit Mikola, kind of like those BFF necklaces that spell out something when you connect them together. But that doesn't make much sense, plus the fact that the other half of the medallion is in Albus's possession, unless Mikola wanted the Albinaurics to have it in the first place. But before I get more into the Albinaurics' origin, during Millicent's quest, she actually comments on the medallion.
"I heard the master of the fort was given a medallion that allowed him to visit the Haligtree.
This sentence confirms Godwyn was given a functioning key to access the Haligtree, but it could be just a rumour Millicent overheard or a misinterpretation, as Castle Sol houses only half of the medallion when we get there, not the whole thing. Perhaps the medallion was initially whole, but split into two at some point in the timeline. And that is where we return to today's subject of the video, Albinaurics. In Castle Sol, there are rooms which show a darker side to this world. Various tools and implements are laid across tables, ropes, cages, and wooden devices. This is a torture chamber, and imprisoned here are Albinaurics. This isn't just exclusive to Castle Sol. You may have noticed in your travels that Albinaurics are mistreated and disregarded all over the lands between. Another extreme example is in Volcano Manor, where a whole section is called Prison Town, and like the name suggests, it's a horrible place. More cages, more torture, more chambers filled with lame, blind, and bound Albinaurics. In the Guest Hall, a morbidly fitting name for an Albinauric prison, there are wooden devices that resemble a real-life torture device called the Scavenger's Daughter, a historical torture apparatus which adds a chilling layer to the Albinauric story. If you're familiar with the infamous torture rack where a victim's limbs would gradually be pulled and stretched, the Scavenger's Daughter is like the opposite of that. This apparatus has two documented variations, but the one closer to resembling Elden Ring's depiction is the Wakefield Tower version. The victim would have their neck, hands, and feet clasped in the irons. Then, as the replica at the Tower of London depicts, the iron bar would force the victim's head towards their knees, applying more and more pressure until they would be so compressed that it would presumably cause internal rupturing. And that is what these Albinaurics appear to be trapped in. But why all this brutality? What could the Albinaurics have done to warrant this? Well, in reality, nothing, for reasons outside of their control, namely the method and reason for their conception and existence. Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands, thus many believe them to live impure lives, untouched by the Erdtree's grace. So let me put that into real-life terms. Imagine we had the science and technology to create viable, fully grown human beings artificially from scratch. It's not far-fetched to assume that some people would likely object to this on moral, ethical, and religious grounds. The latter is what is happening in the Elden Ring universe. Inhabitants see the artificially created Albinaurics as a disgrace to the world's natural order and developmental processes. They have not been touched by the Erdtree, bypassing it completely. Therefore, they are treated like second-class citizens. I, of course, am not condoning this behaviour, but to some inhabitants of the lands between, this is justification enough to mistreat and discriminate against the Albinaurics. At Castle Sol, there is no exception, the Albinaurics here receiving the extreme end of this social stigma. You can see deceased ones hung up in the rafters and the alive ones crammed into torturous hanging devices. Some lying on the floor appear to have their faces covered. This is another form of abuse, the black dumpling. Not food, but a round hood. Mask forced onto a victim's head to lend torture an extra degree of cruelty. It magnifies one's fears and makes them acutely aware of all forms of pain. The horrors of the Albinauric treatment do not stop here. Without their sense of sight, their other senses are heightened, allowing them to feel the torture inflicted more strongly on them. It's sadistic, and the reason I wanted to mention this is because of the medallion. Could the members of Castle Sol be interrogating Albinaurics to find where the second half of the medallion is? Someone must have stolen half of it if Miquella initially gave Godwyn the entire unsplit version, so they captured and tortured Albinaurics to find the other half. And they technically would be onto something, as Albus the Albinauric does have the other half. But he has evaded capture. However, The following line of the dumpling seems to contradict this idea. When the black dumpling goes on, the torturer no longer seeks answers, only to inflict suffering without hope of relief. This suggests that their oppressors have no need for information and just want to hurt. Perhaps the Albinauric prisoners were willing to take the secret of the medallion's location to their graves and accepted the consequences of eternal suffering. One thing I can't get my head around is that if you were going to steal this vitally important key, why would you only take half of it? Why not steal the whole thing if you had the opportunity to do so? Unless it's some form of irony, no one may enter Michaelis Haligtree anymore. The original owner of the medallion and the one who stole a piece cannot, as they need both halves. But that wouldn't make sense for Albinaurics to do this. They believe the Haligtree is their chosen land. What I think may have happened is that Godwyn had the whole unbroken medallion on him the night when he was assassinated, but the medallion broke in half during the struggle and the two pieces were scattered separately. Later, those loyal to Godwyn retrieved one half of the medallion and some Albinaurics found the other half. They kept it safe, but could never hope to reach Castle Sol to piece it together. That's why Albus refers to it as a quaint treasure. It symbolises hope for the Albinaurics. They would look at this medallion and dream of a land where they would be free from persecution. But because of their immobility, they were never able to travel there. For reference, this is where the village of the Albinaurics is, and this is where Michaelis Haligtree is. The distance alone is far for those who cannot use their legs, let alone encountering the countless hostile enemies they would have to face on their journey. That is why Albus says they cannot make this journey, but Latenna can, as she has a mission and a method of transportation, which was Lobo, but now that role has fallen to you. So, after finally collecting both halves of the medallion, you can access the secret path to the consecrated snowfield.
Do you hear me? It is I, Latenna. We have reached the land of Michaelis Haligtree, where Lobo and I began our travels. It's entirely thanks to you that I'm so close to home.
The revelation that Ordina is the place where Latenna originally hails from started to create more questions. I begin to think, well, why does Latenna need our help to retrieve the medallion pieces just to access a lift? She started here, so why couldn't she just reverse her journey? But perhaps her departure from the consecrated snowfield was a one-way journey. While she could leave, returning the same way was nearly impossible. For example, we are high up in the mountains. She could have trekked carefully down the sheer drop with Lobo, but ascending it would be nearly impossible. Hence the reliance on the secret lift.
These great snow-laden lands stretch far to the north, and beyond the ancient bowers and the liturgical town of Ordina lies the place to which I must return.
The word liturgical refers to public worship or religious ceremony. As you explore Ordina, you see who inhabits this eerie town. As you approach the settlement, you see packs of wolves and other Albinaurics, the same as Latenna. They can also ride wolves, shoot arrows, and have the same pale complexion and immobility disposition. They will attack you on sight, presumably in defense of their religious settlement. But when you actually get to Ordina, something quite spooky will occur. Here are docile, spectral wolves and peaceful Albinauric women, sitting utterly unfazed by your presence. How strange. Equipping a particular item, the sentry torch, will allow you to discover another presence: Black Knife Assassins. The contrast between these deadly assassins and the serene spirits is very unsettling. Luckily, they are also unaware of you watching them. What we could be seeing here is a peek into an Evergaol. You can access this one at the back of Ordina, but it differs from what you are used to. Unlike a standard Evergaol that transports you to a smaller circular arena for a boss battle, the Ordina Evergaol immerses you in an alternate, darker version of the liturgical town. The aim of this Evergaol is also different. Instead of defeating one boss, you have to solve a puzzle. The puzzle involves lighting 4 previously invisible torches, each placed atop statues depicting a small figure with long hair, palms open, branches and flowers, a potential representation of young Mikola during the creation of his Haligtree, someone who I would like to cover as it's highly likely we will receive DLC content expanding his character. The association of the town's name, Ordina, with the Latin word ordinalis, meaning order, adds a clever thematic touch to the puzzle, emphasising the sequential nature of lighting the torches. Once you finish the puzzle, the seal is lifted from the town, which opens the way to the Haligtree portal. Now, I made this puzzle sound much easier than it actually is. Not only do you have to parkour around the ancient architecture, but you will also be interrupted by being riddled with arrows by those Albinauric women now stationed on the rooftops. And just when you think you're out of sight, a shiver will course down your spine. You shake it off, thinking you're being paranoid. But then you hear a shifting in the snow. You turn, but it's too late. Those assassins you glimpsed earlier are hiding in the Evergaol, ready to make your experience much more miserable. Luckily, if you have the sentry torch, it will make the Evergaol much more manageable. It will reveal them a couple of feet away, giving you time to square up before they pounce on you. So, you might be thinking, why are the Black Knife assassins here again? The presence of an Evergaol in Ordina is intriguing. Evergaols serve as a tool to isolate individuals who are considered dangerous or criminal. For example, you have Aiden, a thief, you have Vike, a blasphemer, Darrell, a traitor. Establishing an Evergaol typically involves a prisoner and a jailer. Someone must actively lock up the other. We see this with E.G. and Blythe. E.G. puts his friend in the Evergaol because he is a danger to himself and others. In the case of the Ordina Evergaol, we must ask, who imprisoned these assassins and why? We'll get kind of speculatory from here on, so please allow me to indulge for a bit, as we honestly don't have that much hard evidence. If you remember, Ordina is the last stepping stone to access the Haligtree, and we also know that the Black Knife assassins are associated with Rani. She hired them as part of her rebellious scheme. One of the most significant victims affected by this plot was Godwin. But what if he wasn't the only target? I had to dig to find this excerpt, but before Elden Ring was released, there was a news post on the Bandai Namco website. It included a story teaser trailer and flavor text about the history of the Lands Between. It states, "This foul covenant snuffed out the lives of many of the God Queen's kin throughout the Empire, too numerous and too scattered for her godly protection to save. The assassin's targets were multifold, but none was as devastating a loss to the Eternal Queen as that of Godwin the Golden." In this official description, it confirms that multiple demigods were assassinated. We don't know who these individuals are, so they are likely minor characters killed off to make the event seem larger scale. But what is relevant is the second line stating that there were multiple targets. If Mikola was one of those targets, it would make Ordina a crucial location for passage to the Haligtree, Mikola's home. So I theorise that Mikola or one of his soldiers preemptively locked down Ordina to imprison the assassins and seal the gate, preventing access to the portal. As you discovered, there are also Albinauric archers inside the Evergaol. They might have accidentally been caught in this process. Like I said, we don't really know how you make an Evergaol. It might be more abstract than physical, like a wide-ranging spectral blanket cast over an area. Or they might have intentionally entered the Evergaol to act as wardens, to stop the assassins from potentially escaping. That's why they are positioned on the rooftops as a vantage point to track footsteps in the snow. They are potentially trying to prevent the assassins from discovering the solution to the puzzle by lighting all the torches, which is probably why they are also hostile to you. And of course, you have to suspend a bit of belief here that Latenna hasn't conveniently informed them that we are actually friends to the Albinaurics. Speaking of Latenna, her quest continues in the ruins nearby. Upon entering the apostate derelict church, a tall, almost giantess-like Albinauric awaits us. She sits with legs to the side, hands clasped over her stomach, and head lolling to the side, appearing to sleep peacefully. When you approach, you are prompted to summon Latenna, marking the first physical encounter with her since she volunteered to become a spirit.
O young yet towering sister of ours, let the birthing droplet in and create life. For us. For all the Albinaurics.
You watch as something passes from Latenna's hand into Phillia's body. This must be the birthing droplet she refers to. So what is a birthing droplet? For this we need to think back on what Albinaurics are, artificially created life. And how are they created? We learn about that from the Albinauric shield. The ornamentation represents the primordial drop of dew from which they are said to have been created. This mysterious dew is what we will focus on now. Let's start with the definition of dew. Moisture condensed upon the surface of cool bodies, especially at night. A fitting environment to cultivate dew would be the Eternal Cities, where it is perpetually nighttime. Nokron harbours a plant that symbolises the magical nature of this place, a dew-kissed herba, a herb that grows in the false night in and around the Eternal City, soaked in arcane dew, gives off the faint glow of starlight. The liquid-themed descriptive words, dew, tear and droplet, further emphasise the link between the Albinaurics and the Eternal Cities. In Noxtella, for example, there are vials containing celestial dew, a hidden tear found in the Eternal City, also known as a night tear. Yet another example of the liquid symbolism possibly associated with how the Albinaurics were created. And even more so, when you find Phillia in the church, another connected item is lying on the floor before her, the silver mirror shield. The shape is said to imitate that of a sacred drop of dew. And even more so, that Albinauric shield we mentioned earlier, take a closer look at the symbol on the shield. It seems to resemble the curves of a large drip, reinforcing the idea that this special liquid played a significant role in the Albinauric's conception. The details of the transition from a drop to a fully fledged human life form do require some poetic license, though. Now, if you're still sceptical about whether the citizens of the Eternal City were responsible for creating the Albinaurics, allow me to remind you that these people were working on creating their very own lord. They likely began experimenting with smaller life forms before developing into more complex engineering, up until they were abruptly halted by the Greater Will, who said, "Hey, you can't do that," and banished them underground. The Night Folk's creation of the Mimic Tear, a silvery form capable of copying any life form's appearance, parallels the dew's liquid nature. Perhaps the silver fluid of the Mimic Tear and the celestial dew are the same, possessing the same qualities of morphing, transitioning, and mirroring life itself. It would also explain why they are called Mimic Tear and Night Tear, once again synonyms for liquid. There was actually a line that explicitly confirmed that the Night Folk were responsible for creating Albinaurics. This line was said by Thops, the Rea Lucaria Academy reject.
Oh, one more thing. Beware the Albinaurics.
Then this next bit isn't actually voiced, but in the data mined lines, he says, "Accursed souls born of a forbidden rite of the Eternal City." However, these lines were removed from the release version of the game, perhaps because they conflicted with Thops' personality, tone, or context of his questline, or maybe this delivery of lore was too on the nose even for FromSoft. But returning to the birthing droplet, it seems that Latenna is aware of the Albinauric's artificial creation somewhat, because she sought a material to help continue their lineage. Given their unconventional creation, traditional reproduction is likely impossible for the Albinaurics. That's why the birthing droplet can possibly synthesize something close to conception, with Phillia serving as the surrogate. The significance of Phillia's size may be linked to the towering thrones in Nokron and Noxtella, on which the skeletal remains of the Night Folk's attempt to create a lord sit. Now, it's unclear why they are so large, but maybe it's as simple as the larger an entity is, the greater power it possesses. Applying this logic to Phillia suggests that Latenna chose her as the surrogate to ensure a powerful and successful new generation of Albinaurics, her size conveying potency and fertility. As all names in Souls are, the word Phillia actually has a fitting meaning. In ancient Greek, there are 4 words meaning love, all used in different contexts. Phillia is one of them, referring to the fond love and affection you would feel for a close friend. The other 3 types are storge, familial love, agape, a selfless love between God and humankind, and eros, a passionate, erotic kind of love. Now, storge makes more sense when describing Phillia's relationship to the Albinauric family, but I think in this case, the umbrella definition of Phillia, just meaning love in general, displays a heartwarming sentiment, symbolising hope for the future of the Albinaurics and the love that connects them. Now, if you're familiar with Elden Ring, you might say, but Chalice, there is already another generation of Albinaurics. Yes, these froggy guys. While my attention has primarily been on the first generation, now time to talk about the existing second generation, and we will do so with skepticism. These amphibian-like beings are mostly found roaming the area of the lakes, and are second-generation Albinaurics with dumpy heads that resemble those of frogs. They exhibit notable physical differences from their more humanoid predecessors, but ignoring aesthetics, this second generation is much more mobile, hypermobile even, often cartwheeling around. Given the artificial origin of the Albinaurics, we could view this as an intentional genetic modification, a deliberate refinement for a subsequent generation. In that cut dialogue by Thops, he goes on to remark,
"The curse withered the legs of the old and silenced the tongues of the frogs."
This distinction clarifies that the first generation did struggle with their legs, as we previously established, but also that the second generation is mute. And this is when I started to get suspicious. If I were presented with pictures of both generations and no prior knowledge, I would probably guess that this second generation was a stepping stone to achieve the first generation, but apparently not. The first generation was the first attempt at creating life, and it's beautiful and pretty accurate in mimicking humankind, with the only drawback being non-functional legs. Surprisingly, however, further modifications seem to regress the next generation, introducing muteness in exchange for restoring their ability to walk, and of course looking like this. Absolutely no offense to these guys, I want to understand how they went from this to that. That's why I want you to consider for a moment that the Night Folk, those responsible for creating the first gen, did not create the second gen. Someone else did. Someone who didn't have the same materials, equipment, and skills as the Night Folk, hence why the second generation look the way they do. Let me preface this by saying that this is my opinion, and the theory is not without its holes, but let me present my findings and see what you think. What if the sorcerers of Raya Lucaria Academy played a role in creating the second generation? The Academy, known for its pursuit of glintstone knowledge and arcane studies, might have been intrigued by the unique properties of the first-gen Albinaurics. Considering the societal indifference towards the treatment of Albinaurics, they may have become subjects of the Academy's experimentation. A few Academy helms boost arcane, and then there is also arcane Albinauric ones, hinting at the sorcerer's vested interest. Given that the Albinaurics cast sorcery using their innate arcaneness, it's plausible that the sorcerers were drawn to these intriguing beings. The leg defect observed in the first gen could have prompted the sorcerers to begin experimentation aimed at rectifying this characteristic. However, impeding speech may have been an accidental byproduct, or something darker. Were the Albinaurics intentionally silenced? This would be supported by the imprisoned first gens. They let out a really chilling wail when in distress. they may have been deliberately and genetically silenced to be more amiable and effectively subjugated. The Albinauric shield mentions that the Albinauric's most formidable foes were sorcerers after all, which aligns with this theory and suggests a contentious history between these two factions. How the Albinaurics patrol so close to the Academy might imply this lingering grudge. The societal prejudice against Albinaurics, irrespective of generation, might explain Thops's disdainful remarks. But if Thops knows of the Academy's experimentation, this introduces a larger conspiracy. Perhaps the sorcerers are not proud of their creation, the second gen, considering it a flawed result. Therefore, they do not take ownership and deflect accountability. Hence that is why Thops's last cut line says,
"And now, they hold deep grudges for anyone left untouched."
Why would the Albinaurics hold a grudge based on one's nature of existence, those left untouched? We have far more evidence to support that the people of the Lands Between are the bigoted ones, prejudiced against the Albinaurics for not being touched by the Erdtree. The Albinaurics are right to hold a grudge for their poor treatment, especially if the second gens were created in the circumstances that they were. My final twist to the Albinauric story is the existence of the red Albinaurics in Mogwyn Palace. This variant is similar in every way to their silver relatives, apart from their skin being red. This suggests a potential influence from the palace's inhabitants. Perhaps they experimented on the second gen, resulting in a subtype, second gen B, so to speak. But it's uncertain if this is the outcome of genetic tinkering or environmental influence. Their skin has simply been stained a reddish hue from the copious blood everywhere. The truth is, I don't know. The Albinaurics are creatures of mystery and uncertain origin. I still have a lot of unanswered questions. For example, who are the Night Folk really? Their silvery skin and the indication that they bleed silver from the preset description in the CC menu seem to apply so. Plus, why do we not find any first or second generation Albinaurics actually inside of Nokron or Noxtella, the place of their supposed origin? I understand that the Night Folk were banished for their blasphemous lord formation some time ago, but there isn't actually any concrete Albinauric evidence here, apart from the formless mimic tears and giant skeletons. This raises questions about the timing and possibility of the Albinaurics being above ground during the banishment. Or perhaps they are really not from the Eternal Cities. I want to mention one more figure to conclude this video with positivity. So we established that the Haligtree would become the Albinaurics' new home. However, due to their immobility issue, how would they get there? Enter Loretta, an embodiment of hope, an Albinauric advocate. Encountered as a spectral presence in the Carian Manor, Loretta, once a royal Carian knight, went on a journey in search of a haven for Albinaurics and determined that the Haligtree was their best chance for eventual salvation. Presumably after seeing the mistreatment of the Albinaurics, Loretta vowed to help them. This also corroborates my theory that the Carian family, or at least the Rea Lucaria academics, mistreated the Albinaurics for testing. Loretta would have witnessed this, lighting the fire within her to do something about it. Several aspects hint at Loretta's potential connection to the Albinaurics, namely being one herself. The reasons to support this are: she's never seen using her legs. When you encounter her at the Carian Manor and Haligtree, she is perpetually on horseback, mirroring the Albinauric archers mounted on direwolves. There is no way to dismount Loretta to prove this, though. Secondly, it is said that the bow was Loretta's favoured weapon. This preference echoes the first generation's weapon choice, mainly as a strategic adaptation to overcome their challenges with mobility. However, there are equal reasons why Loretta cannot be an Albinauric. Rising to the esteemed position of a royal knight would be quite an anomaly and contradict the social hierarchy. The only other named Albinauric we know of amongst the Carian family is Phillia, a mere servant. It's doubtful that if the Carians knew Loretta was an Albinauric, they would make an exception to give her such status as a royal knight, bestowing heavy armour, great weapons, and her own battle horse. Additionally, Loretta's red blood does not match the Albinauric characteristic of having silver blood. This biological difference is the most damning evidence that Loretta is not an Albinauric. The game itself even refers to it as an absurd rumour. However, one could argue that the red blood you see is from the horse, or even more so, a programming oversight. I don't like to throw out this excuse leisurely, but the Albinauric's biology is a little janky. For example, you get locked in this animation when you perform a backstab or stance break on an enemy, and it appears that the blood splatter is part of the animation irrespective of the enemy type. So for the Albinaurics, you get their actual white blood coming out, and then the red blood that's just attached to the animation. So Loretta's character model and her bleeding could be an oversight like this. Loretta's impact on the Albinauric cause is undeniable regardless of her origin. The presence of her shield in front of Phillia at the apostate derelict serves as a poignant token, signalling her journey to the consecrated snowfield and a promise, perhaps, to return for Phillia and the Albinauric people. You might be thinking, well, there are no Albinaurics in the Haligtree. Wasn't this all done in vain? But you would be mistaken. You may have stumbled upon peculiar cocoon-like sacs within the Haligtree. Their shape is strikingly akin to the hunched posture of the first-gen Albinaurics. I found a Discord screenshot dissecting the asset to reveal an Albinauric character model inside of the cocoon. Small head, emphasized bones, and elongated arms and legs. I couldn't find the original Discord post or server, but to my knowledge this seems legitimate. And if you're interested, I've included the link to the Reddit thread discussing this in the description. An intriguing possibility arises that Loretta played a role in transporting these Albinaurics to the Haligtree, chauffeuring them on her large horse. The purpose of the cocoons is another matter. There may be a link here with Miquella's connection to the Haligtree and his own current cocooned state. Who is it that Miquella shall bless, if not the low and the meek? Maybe the Albinaurics are undergoing metamorphosis, finding refuge within silken cocoons as they transition into their pupal stage. Finally, they have found shelter where nothing outside can bother them. What they will transform into, if at all, we can only wonder. But for now, let us leave them be. The conclusion to Latenna's quest ends with a final poignant request.
Our young yet towering sister will give us hope. Now that nothing is left unfinished, I will join you in battle to the bitter end. And when the fighting is done, then you may lay me to rest. Beside Lobo, my dear wolf.
The custom among players is to take Latenna's spirit ashes and drop them back at the slumbering wolf shack. While the game does not recognize this action nor provide any tangible reward, the act just feels right. A heartfelt tribute to honor Latenna's unwavering dedication to secure a future for her kind. Even after transcending realms, dwelling in limbo as a spirit ash, we can only hope that now Latenna will get the reunion she deserves with her wolf companion, playing together, riding around and resting eternally. Two halves together again. If you made it this far, thank you for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed the lore and my thoughts. Please always feel free to add your own interpretations in the comments below. And if you're interested in seeing how I make my cosplays, I have a Patreon and YouTube memberships where I show this process and behind the scenes. Thank you again so much for watching. It's -4 degrees here at the moment and this is freezing cold metal, so I'm going to get into my pajamas now. Thank you all, and a special shout out to my channel members and patrons.